game poker and a movie all have in common? Well, that would be Molly Bloom. While the name might not ring any bells to the avid poker player, it might. The card game of life dealt Molly Bloom an incredible hand. From Olympic trials to court trials, Molly never folded. Molly Bloom's parents had been dealt a full house on April 21st, 1978, when the dealer had dealt Molly. It was only 4 years later that Jeremy Bloom was added to their hand on April 2nd. Molly's mom, Char Bloom, was a ski and fly fisher instructor for 20 years, who now owns her own clothing brand. Molly's father, Larry Bloom, was a psychology professor at Colorado State University, where he taught psychopathy and psychobiology for 44 years. Molly was raised in Loveland, Colorado, where she became an incredible skier. At a young age, Molly developed the "if you're not first, you're last" mentality, which allowed her to become a young prodigy at just the age of 12. That is, until disaster struck. Molly was diagnosed with scoliosis and was in dire need of surgery to correct the issue. Although doctors weren't sure if she would ever be hitting the slopes again, that didn't stop Molly. After her fully fused spine was healed, she was back on the fast track to becoming an Olympian. While training, Molly attended the University of Colorado Boulder, surprisingly known for creating Winter Olympians. In Molly's sophomore year of college, she placed third in her signature event, a type of freestyle skiing. But her dream of being an Olympian was shattered when she took a nasty tumble. When Molly returned to her normal life, she was said to feel trapped in a life she no longer wanted. Instead of waiting for a tell sign of what she should do, Molly packed her bags and moved to LA. Raising the stakes by moving to LA, Molly had no idea what she wanted to do. Utilizing her good looks, Molly took a waitressing gig at a high-end bar. It was after one of these shifts that she was almost hit by a Mercedes. Little did she know Riordan Green would emerge from this. During the encounter, Green had anteed in and offered Bloom a job, which is where she would acquire her nickname, the Poker Princess. Green decided Molly was going to be the hostess for one of his poker games. On her first night, Molly received $3,000 in tips by simply just waiting on businessmen, movie stars, and directors all involved in a high-stakes poker game. After a couple months spent in the Viper Room, Mr. Green decided Molly had learned a little too much about his poker games and fired her. It was that night Bloom used the contacts she had made there and created her own high-stakes poker game. She even took out a planning LLC and needed to find a new place to host her game. Bloom set up in hotel after hotel, buy-ins increased, and 5-star restaurants catered. People not even involved in the games began to show their faces, like Nellie and the Olsen twins. One familiar face, Tobey Maguire, made life on Molly a little harder. With him at her table, Molly never had a peaceful night, and in light of that, she packed her bags and moved to the Big Apple, where she planned to capitalize big time. It was here that the buy-in was a whopping $250,000, where stars like A-Rod made appearances weekly. Molly was all in. Her poker games began to last longer than 24 hours, and her life was in a downhill spiral. She had turned to popping pills to stay up, drinking to forget, and taking Xanax to level it all out. And to make all matters worse, she had begun bankrolling players with her own credit. Essentially, her customers were saying, "Thanks for allowing me to win $5 million you vouched for." Because she began bankrolling, a player had burned her for $250,000, which led her to begin taking a percentage of the pot. After she began taking a rake, the cause and effect led her down an even worse track. Her driver introduced her to 2 Russian mobsters who offered her protection, in which Molly refused. When denied, they both penalized her for pulling out guns and beating her. After this, Bloom hid in her apartment for days, waiting for the bruises to heal, and discovering that the FBI had been on the tail of a poker ring in New York. It was in 2011 that one of Bloom's games had been rushed and all her assets and money had been frozen. After testifying against one of her regular clients in court, Molly moved back home to Colorado with her mom as she was conducting a book deal, and her life seemed to be on the mend. She moved back to LA in 2013 after the FBI showed up to her apartment, guns blazing, and a warrant for her arrest. Bloom was facing 5 years in prison until the judge determined she had only been a minor player in the poker ring and sentenced her to 1 year probation, a fine of $1,000, and 200 hours of community service. After court, she was offered a $45,000 book deal from HarperCollins, in which she wrote the book Molly's Game, which was a bestseller and has since been made into a movie. The hand Molly had been dealt throughout her life may not have been a royal flush, but it definitely had its ups. With a second chance at life, Molly is determined to help empower women and leave her life of poker in the past. Thank you.